Hello everyone, welcome to Class 3 of Writing 101. Today we're going to talk about character, specifically how we write one from scratch, not how you further your character into a series or even along a single plot, meaning standalone novel. The thing about character that is truly important to me as an author and even as a reader is that if it seems too familiar, I won't engage, I won't connect with them. And the reason why that happens so often is because there has been several stories told several times for such a long time, and so coming up with a fresh character is not easy. But what you can do is write a character or several that means something to you. And I don't mean something that influenced your character. Do you know what I mean? Like, let's say you're a big Harry Potter fan. If you come up with a character like Harry or Ron or even not just Hermione, but like Snape and all these characters that are well known, it's just gonna bore your reader because they've seen it already. And because of the popularity, it might turn them off. It's just like, why are you writing the same thing? Why are you trying to be like this famous author? That defeats the purpose of being a writer. The whole point is to, share parts of who you are, even the parts you don't like in yourself or others. So, we're going to do an exercise today to basically start from a clean slate when it comes to creating character, alright? Because without interesting characters, without some kind of personal connection that you feel as an author towards your characters, it just won't feel real. You can have a very fantastical world, and it can fall flat on its face if your reader does not connect to it, because if you don't connect to your character first, they're not going to connect with it either. So here's how we're going to do this, okay? First step is take a blank piece of paper, okay? This represents what I call a character sheet. Well, that term already exists, but there's two kinds of character sheets. Character sheet for an illustrator is essentially a head-to-toe shot of what a character looks like, and that helps the reader understand how to picture the character. But the character sheet I'm talking about for writing is essentially a word cloud that you take as a blueprint for actually writing the details. Like, this is just going to be keywords, key characteristics and important things to implement into your character sheet. So here we go. And it doesn't have to be the actual character you're coming up with. Okay, this is just an exercise. So we'll just go basic. We'll just go John. Alright? Here's our John Doe. Okay, and then circle it. Okay, so all we have here is a name. Okay, now this doesn't mean anything at all. It's just our starting point. So the first thing we want to think about is profession, because everyone has a job, or maybe he doesn't have a job. Maybe he's unemployed, but we don't know that. So to give him something that gives him something to do, we'll just go with a basic job. We'll just say waiter. Okay? Okay, so now we have a person and a profession. Now, when you take a profession, you have to ask yourself, does he like his job? Has he been doing this for a long time? Is this something he's always wanted to do? Does he hate his job? Does he love his job? We don't know. So that's the kind of question you start asking yourselves when you build this word cloud. So for argument's sake, to keep things simple, we'll say hates it. No, that's a terrible circle. Yeah, when I just go on the fly, I don't really pay attention. But yeah, here. So now we see person, job, feeling. Okay. Now you have to ask yourself, well, why does he hate it? And we'll say, has dream job. Okay, there's no specifics here yet, but that's your job when you start coming up with your story afterwards. And we're going to say in mind, not just has dream job, we'll say has dream job in mind. Because with that, now we know that he's thinking about it. Okay, he's thinking about it, but he doesn't have it. And he doesn't know if he'll be able to achieve that. Okay, so that part in terms of profession is done. Now we have to see what his personal life is. We'll say divorced. Okay. Now you have to say, how does he feel about that? I mean, you kind of have an idea already, but we'll say, what happened to him after the divorce. Something very simple, something like just after. We'll say, kicked out. As in, his wife kicked him out of the house, okay? So, kicked out. Now we'll say where he's living. So now he's living small apartment. Now this can be anything, okay? It doesn't have. He could be some rich guy, right? He could have gotten a good settlement from his divorce and then gotten a nice house or a nice apartment. But for the sake of grounding your character, we're going to say that he has no money or very little. Because the thing about divorce is that it's so complicated. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what kind of agreement you're going to be, forced to agree to, because, divorce is messy. I've never experienced it, but I've heard stories. So, okay. Now we have two things, okay, that are completed. Well, enough for you to use something for meat. So now we have job, feeling, secondary feeling. Personal situation, what happened second. Okay? So the third thing is personality. Okay? How did he take this divorce? What was his reaction to it? What is his way of dealing with his sadness for his current work situation? Because we all deal with pain very differently. We all deal with our sadness very differently. So we'll say he's a drinker. Okay? So now we have his vice, his coping mechanism. Okay, everyone has one. It's not always alcohol. It's very typical to write that, but I'm just coming up with an exercise for you. Now let's say a situation that arose because of his drinking. We'll say gets into bar fight all the time. Now, I say all the time because whenever you see a movie where this happens, it's always just one or two. But we don't know how complicated this man is or how destructive he is. Okay, there's a lot of destructive people out there that when they get into bad habits like drinking or smoking, doing drugs, it's never just one time. They don't get into trouble just one time. It can happen several times, but we can't judge them, right? We don't know what their life is like. We don't know why they are the way they are. But that's our job as writers, right? Is to take a person and ask ourselves many questions regarding why is this person the way they are? How can we help them change for the better or the worse? And that's another thing I want to really be keen on. Not every story of transformation ends happily. To say that you took a character that was in a shitty place and then made them their life much better at the end is too much of a cliche. It's too easy. It's too predictable. You can create an interesting story without a happy ending. This character, John, doesn't have to go from sad to happy in order for the story to be not just interesting but rewarding for the reader. Like, you can learn something about a character without taking away what made you buy into the character at first. There's this tough situation that they're going through and you want to know if they're gonna make it or not. But what if they don't? Does that mean that the story is shitty? No. That's not the point of storytelling. Storytelling is about making a reader think. Whether it's about their own life or someone else that they know. Maybe they know someone that is like John, that is a very sad person and doesn't know how to cope properly or is too afraid to change. And you having a character that's too afraid to change is actually still interesting. They don't have to change for them to be connected to the reader. Anyway, so let's say that he goes to prison for assault. Okay? Goes to prison for physical or sexual assault. Now you might be asking me, well, Andre, what if my reader doesn't like that? What if they don't like my character? Right? For here. Well, no one said that your reader had to actually like the character. It just means that they did something awful. It's surprising, it's off-putting, but it doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. Okay, so last thing is how you decide to do redemption. So, for redemption, or the opposite, it's a matter of the character's reaction to their own actions. So how do they react to themselves? The situations that they've put themselves in. So, for prison, let's say months later or a year later, he finishes his sentence. What does he do? Is he the same person when he leaves? So, for that, we won't write something concrete. We'll just say a question. After prison, sorry for my penmanship when you see this, good or bad change. Now, this is up to you as you write your story. To make when you decide good or bad change, not just for this prison scene, but any scene you decide to do as a climax, that will decide how your story ends and how you conclude your character arc. But it won't taint or deplete your reader's intrigue in the character. It's not about a triumphant ending. It's about one that makes sense to you. Whether you decide to make the character a good person or a bad person. It's not about making a bad person a good person at the end, or vice versa. It's how the person changes in your eyes. And hopefully that change that you saw in the character, or the lack thereof, will mean something to the reader. You can have a main character that doesn't change at all. and it will still tug at the reader's heartstrings, because maybe the reason why they didn't change is because they're afraid of it. If you've seen the show Shameless, I forgot the deadbeat father's name, but there's this scene, a hospital scene, where the daughter asks him, "Why can't you change? Or you should change." And he says, "What if I don't want to change?" There's people out there that it's not that they're unwilling, it's more that they're afraid of what will happen to them when they do change. Will they lose themselves in the process? And as writers, that's ultimately our goal. Not to change a character, but to show the human side of them. Show the reader why this person is the way they were at the beginning and then towards the end. Now, of course, this is nothing, okay? This is just an exercise. There's nothing really real here about John. These are just key things that you can think of when you actually write your character sheet. I said character sheet in the beginning just as an idea of understanding what you're doing here, okay? So you take the key information that you've come up with here and then try to implement that into an actual full description of your character. And then from then on, you can start building your story around that person. Ask yourself, what kind of story would benefit this character? So let's say you write a series. The key thing to remember in a series is that you are doing this long character arc for several people, or just one. Maybe you're focusing on one main character and everyone else is just kind of there for the story. The thing to remember about that, though, is the character you come up with before you start writing, especially for a series, it's not about creating this rich tapestry before you even start. It's about understanding who your character is as a person, not as some caricature. Okay, that's silly. You're not making a character. It's not some, fictional person. It's a human being. Even if it's an alien, you have to show the human side. No one's gonna connect with your characters if there's some cookie cutter thing of something you read before. If you want to have high fantasy, that's great. You do you. But it won't grab people's attention if all they see is color, action, and discussion. There has to be some kind of sentimental value. Even if it's extremely imaginative and complex and rich, there's still something there that's human. And that's what's important in storytelling, is the human aspect of what you're doing. Not just in the characters, but in the world you create. Even if you have them living on some alien planet called Zorlon. I don't know. I'm just making shit up. I don't really read that stuff. There's still a society there, right? And that means that there's feelings. There's a government. There's control. There's rioting. I don't know. That depends on what kind of story you want to write. But what's so important to me about character, why I always focus on it before I even start writing, even before I start world building, is the world that surrounds them. It's just there. It has a living and breathing energy to it, and that's why world building is quite hard at the beginning, because if you don't know, I don't want to say you don't know what you're doing, you're still new to everything, it can really take you down a peg if all you focus on is the universe you want to create. The characters are really the driving force of your story, because that's who your readers remember. They remember the characters. The world is just there for the sake of entertainment and to further along these people along. And yeah, if the world changes around them, maybe they change with it. Maybe they don't. I don't know. Depends on how you go about your story. And which character means the most to you. Which one is the driving force. You know, if you only have one person really driving the story forward, great. But don't forget that you have other people to acknowledge, right? Just because you have a central character doesn't mean the other ones don't matter. They're just as valuable. You're just focusing more on one person. The other reason why character is so important to me is because emotion is vital in storytelling. And the world does not have as much of a clarity as the emotion that a character has. It may amplify their emotion, but in the end, it's the character that shows the emotion, that goes through change, or goes through something that scares them from change, and they remain the same, but they're aware of why they aren't changing and why they don't want to. You know, I mean, there's just something about being a human being that has always fascinated me. You know, we all have these hopes and dreams that we try to strive for, and we don't know if we're going to achieve them. And if we do, we don't know how we got there, or if we're going to get there in the way we hope we do, or sooner or later. I don't know. There's such a variety of people. Even if two people are the same, they still have some slight differences. And that's what makes storytelling so interesting. You know, you don't know what you're going to come up with. And that's why you can't over-prepare. I hear these authors that they plan everything before they even put pen to paper. I'm like, why would you do that? Why would you box yourself into one storyline, one description of a character, and then pin yourself into one like linear way of thinking? You can do a bit of planning, obviously, and a basic outline before you start, but you have to remember that when you're writing, especially when you're drafting over and over again, things change. You might even have a different plan for the character you had originally. And that's why this exercise here is so simple, because you don't want to have a character done one way and then feel frustrated when you start writing because you end up writing them differently. So when you do your exercises and your planning and whatnot, you have to understand that this is all preliminary. It's not concrete. It's not, set in stone. But at the same time, don't take forever. I've heard people that took like 10 years before they even thought about putting their book out there. Don't do that. Okay? There's being a perfectionist and trusting yourself. And I'm not saying screw it, put whatever you want out there. No, I'm saying put the best you can. Like when you look at it, if you're pretty satisfied, have someone else read it for you if you don't feel truly confident in the result of it. But don't sit on it too long. Okay? So I hope you learned a lot, and have a good day. Bye.